The galaxy stands on the brink of war, and the only way to stop it? A shocking proposal. Commander Zachary Brenton, a skilled military officer from Earth, is sent to the distant world of Lumia Prime with a mission that could change the fate of 2 worlds. But nothing could prepare him for the alien princess he's about to meet. When Princess Celine hears the proposal, she's stunned. "You're taking me as your wife? Really?" A political marriage to prevent war. But what happens when duty collides with desire? Can they build a bridge between their species, or will their differences tear them apart? The future of the galaxy lies in their hands, but their hearts may be their greatest challenge. Will love triumph over politics, or will the weight of the universe crush them both? Stay tuned to discover the shocking twists that will change everything. If you're new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. Commander Zachary Brenton walked steadily through the shimmering corridors of the Celestial Palace, his footsteps echoing softly against the crystal floors. The palace was a marvel of alien architecture, with translucent walls that glowed faintly under the stars. Every corner of the grand structure seemed to hum with an energy that Zachary could barely understand. But he was here for a reason, one that would shape the future of both his people and the Therians, the advanced alien race that inhabited this world. Zachary had been in many dangerous situations before. He had faced battles, fought for peace, and had been to the farthest reaches of space in the name of diplomacy. But today was different. This mission wasn't about weapons or strategies. It was about something far more delicate: peace. He adjusted his uniform, the black and silver of his military armor reflecting the light as he walked. It wasn't just for show. His uniform had been carefully crafted for both formality and protection. The weight of it, along with the badge on his chest, signaled that he was here as a representative of humanity. Yet, despite all the preparation, a sense of unease settled in his chest. He wasn't sure how the Princess Celine would react to the proposition he was about to make. Behind him, his bodyguard Lyra followed silently, her footsteps as quiet as his. She had been with him for years, always vigilant, always ready. Her steely armor gleamed in the light, contrasting with the gentleness of the surrounding atmosphere. Zachary appreciated her loyalty and strength, but even she seemed tense today. Lyra, however, said nothing. She understood the gravity of the situation, just as much as Zachary did. "You know, Lyra," Zachary muttered, breaking the silence. "When they said this diplomatic mission would be challenging, I didn't expect it to be quite this interesting." Lyra suppressed a smile. "Arranging an interspecies marriage to prevent a galactic war isn't exactly standard protocol, sir," she replied dryly. Zachary sighed. The situation had escalated far beyond what he had expected. The galaxy was on the brink of war. The humans, the Therians, and several other factions were teetering on the edge of conflict, and it was his responsibility to try and stop it. The stakes were high, too high to let any opportunity slip away. A political marriage had been proposed, a marriage between a human and the princess of the Therians, Celine. It was a bold and risky plan, but it was the only option left to prevent full-scale war. As they approached the grand audience chamber, Zachary's pulse quickened. This was it, the moment he would meet Celine, the princess who was to decide the fate of so many lives. The chamber was vast, with towering pillars that reached towards the high ceiling. High-ranking Therians, their silvery skin glinting in the soft light, lined the room, watching their every move. Zachary couldn't help but notice how the Therians carried themselves, with an air of regality and power. Their presence seemed to fill the room, creating an invisible barrier between the humans and their world. At the center of the chamber, sitting on a raised throne, was Princess Celine. Her beauty was like nothing Zachary had ever seen. Her long, white hair cascaded over her shoulders, catching the light and glowing like a halo. Her striking blue eyes, which seemed almost otherworldly, met his gaze as he entered the room. Zachary felt his breath catch for a moment. He had seen holovids of her, of course, but nothing compared to seeing her in person. "Commander Zachary Brenton, representative of the Human Alliance," the Royal Herald announced, breaking the silence. His voice resonated through the chamber, echoing off the crystal walls. Zachary straightened, his military training kicking in. He advanced with measured steps, stopping at the prescribed distance from the throne. He bowed, his posture perfect. "Your Highness," he said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of the situation. "I bring greetings from Earth and an unusual proposal." Celine's eyes flickered with curiosity, and she leaned forward slightly, her gaze never leaving his. "We are aware of the growing tensions between our peoples," she said, her voice soft but with an underlying strength that commanded respect. "What proposal does Earth offer?" Zachary took a deep breath, his mind racing for the right words. This was the moment that could either make or break the peace. "Your Highness," he began, "in light of the escalating situation and the very real threat of war between our nations, the Human Alliance proposes a solution that has served humanity well throughout its history." He paused, watching as Selena's expression remained unreadable. "A diplomatic marriage between yourself and me." The room seemed to hold its breath. Zachary noticed Celine's eyes widen just slightly, and for a moment he feared she might faint. But then, to his surprise, a curious expression crossed her face. Was it relief? Confusion? Zachary couldn't be sure. "You're taking me as your wife?" Selene asked, her voice filled with genuine surprise. The words broke the formal atmosphere, and the room erupted into hushed whispers. Zachary nodded, maintaining his composure. "Yes, Your Highness. If you're willing, of course," he added quickly, not wanting to sound presumptuous. "The union would serve as a bridge between our peoples, demonstrating that humans and Therians can not only coexist, but build something beautiful together." There was a long silence. Celine's eyes were no longer filled with shock, but something else, something more contemplative. Zachary waited, holding his breath. "Such a proposal requires careful consideration," Selene finally said, her voice carrying a hint of warmth that had not been there before. "Would you join me in my private gardens to discuss the details?" Zachary nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. This was just the beginning. The hard part was yet to come, but he couldn't deny the flicker of hope that had begun to stir inside him. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for peace. As they left the chamber, Zachary could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He had just made a proposal that could either save the galaxy or doom it. But one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The private gardens of the royal palace were far removed from the formalities of the court. When Zachary entered, he immediately felt the weight of the world lift off his shoulders, though only slightly. The towering crystalline structures of the palace were replaced with bioluminescent trees and soft glowing flowers that lit the path in gentle hues of blue, purple, and gold. It was as if the garden itself knew the importance of the moment and adjusted the environment to reflect the serenity needed for their conversation. Princess Selene walked ahead, her white gown trailing lightly behind her, reflecting the soft glow of the flowers that dotted the ground. Her grace was like nothing Zachary had seen before. Her movements were fluid, as though she were one with the very nature surrounding her. As they walked through the path, Zachary couldn't help but notice how her presence seemed to change the atmosphere. Every step she took seemed to command respect, not just from those who served her, but from the world itself. They reached a secluded alcove within the gardens, where a small fountain trickled melodically. The sound of the water created a soothing ambiance, contrasting with the tension that still lingered between Zachary and Selene. The faint hum of energy surrounded them, a natural aspect of the Therians' connection to their planet. It was a feeling Zachary had yet to fully understand, but he felt its presence nonetheless. Selene gestured to a bench nearby, inviting Zachary to sit. He lowered himself carefully, trying to maintain his composure despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through his mind. This wasn't a typical diplomatic meeting. This was something entirely new, something uncharted. "I must admit," Selene said, her voice soft but strong, "this is not quite how I imagined our first meeting would go." Zachary chuckled lightly, his nerve showing for the first time. I'm not sure anyone could have predicted this, he replied, his voice warmer than he intended. I didn't expect to be proposing a marriage either. Celine smiled slightly, the corner of her lips curving up just enough to show a flash of emotion. Yes, well, most humans would find such a proposal unusual. And yet here we are. Zachary took a deep breath. I didn't expect you to accept so readily. I thought there would be more resistance. Her expression shifted, becoming more thoughtful. I would be lying if I said I wasn't surprised. But Commander, there is more to this than simply the political circumstances. She paused, her eyes locking with his. I have studied your species, your culture, and your values. I see the possibilities you offer beyond just your military might. Zachary blinked, taken aback by her openness. You've studied us? Yes, she replied with a nod. Ever since the Peace Summit 3 cycles ago, when I first saw you speak. The way you spoke about humanity's vision for the future, it struck a chord with me. I wanted to understand what it was that drove you. The surprise in Zachary's chest deepened. He had been aware that his speech had made waves, but he hadn't realized it had reached the princess. I had no idea. Your words about building bridges, about finding common ground between species, stayed with me, Celine continued, her voice laced with sincerity. I was intrigued by the idea of humans being driven by something more than just logic. You follow your hearts, even in politics. Zachary felt a flicker of warmth at her words. He had always believed that passion and emotion were vital parts of diplomacy, something that the galaxy often ignored in favor of cold calculations. Hearing her speak of it now made him feel a deeper connection to her than he had expected. It's true, he said quietly. We do tend to follow our hearts. We believe that sometimes that's the only way forward. Celine's gaze softened, her blue eyes reflecting a deeper understanding. I admire that. In my culture, we've always been taught to distance ourselves from our emotions, to control them. But seeing you, hearing you speak, there's something raw and real about humans. It's refreshing. The air between them shifted. There was something in her voice now, a hint of vulnerability. For the first time, Zachary realized that the princess wasn't just a political figurehead. She was someone with real emotions, fears and desires just like him. You're not what I expected either, Zachary said, his voice tinged with curiosity. When I was assigned this mission, I didn't know what to expect. I thought you would be like most royalty, distant, untouchable, maybe even cold. But you're different. Celine tilted her head slightly as if considering his words. I've been taught to be what my people expect of me, a princess, a symbol of power and tradition. But I wonder, sometimes, if that is all there is to me. I want to understand more than just what I've been told is my duty, and I believe humans might offer a different way of seeing the world. The conversation hung between them, fragile, yet powerful. Zachary's mind raced with the weight of her words. He had always seen diplomacy as a means to an end, a job he had trained for. But now, in this secluded corner of the royal garden, he felt something else. This wasn't just about preventing war or securing peace. It was about forging something deeper, something real. Celine stood up slowly, turning to face him fully. I think we need to continue this discussion, Commander. Not just about politics or duty, but about what we truly want. Would you join me for dinner tonight? It will be a more private setting, and we can discuss this proposal in a way that reflects the seriousness of the decision. Zachary stood as well, nodding. I would be honored, Your Highness. But there was something more. In his tone now, something beyond the formalities. He was beginning to understand that this arrangement might not be as simple as he had believed. As they walked back toward the palace, the sounds of the garden fading behind them, Zachary couldn't shake the feeling that their paths had crossed, for a reason. The proposal, the union, the very idea of it seemed more and more like the beginning of something extraordinary. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, it would not just change their lives, it would change everything. The dinner that evening was more than a diplomatic meeting. It was the beginning, of a new chapter, one filled with unexpected twists and turns, both personal and political, and neither of them knew yet how deep that chapter would go, nor how much it would challenge everything they thought they knew about their worlds. The evening sky was darkening as they walked back toward the palace, the shimmering bioluminescent plants of the garden casting their soft glow around them. The air was cool and still, with only the occasional rustle of the leaves from the distant breeze to break the silence. The mood between Zachary and Celine had shifted. No longer was it simply about diplomacy or the intricacies of galactic politics. Now something more personal had begun to take root between them. Zachary couldn't help but steal glances at the princess, who walked beside him, her presence as captivating as ever. The light from the glowing flora highlighted her striking features, her smooth pale skin, the cascade of white hair that seemed to glow with a light of its own, and her piercing blue eyes that seemed to look straight into his soul. There was a depth in her gaze now, something more than the royal demeanor she wore in the court. For the first time since arriving on Lumia Prime, Zachary felt a connection that went beyond the formalities. The words exchanged earlier in the gardens had left an impression on him. Celine was not just the princess of an alien empire. She was a person with dreams, fears, and desires of her own. A person who, in her own way, understood the gravity of the situation they found themselves in. As they reached the private dining chamber, Zachary felt a sense of anticipation. The chamber was beautifully designed, with crystalline walls that seemed to shimmer with every movement. A long, elegant table was set in the center, surrounded by delicate chairs woven with strands of silver and gold. Floating orbs of light illuminated the room, casting soft shadows that danced on the walls. The atmosphere was intimate, yet regal, perfect, for what lay ahead. Celine gestured for him to take a seat, and they both settled into their places at the table. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, the weight of their earlier conversation still lingering in the room. "I had the chefs prepare something special for you," Celine said, her voice soft, breaking the silence. "Earth delicacies as you requested. I hope they meet your expectations." Zachary smiled slightly, his mind still preoccupied with the depth of their conversation. "You've done your research thoroughly," he said, his voice laced with genuine appreciation. "It's not often I get to enjoy a true taste of home." Celine smiled back, the warmth in her expression unmistakable. She seemed at ease now, more relaxed than she had been in the formalities of the court. As the food was served, a variety of dishes from Earth that Zachary had missed, there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The conversation no longer felt like a negotiation or a political move. It felt like two people, getting to know one another, sharing something simple yet profoundly human. As they ate, they spoke of everything and nothing at all, of the places Zachary had visited, of the foods he had grown up with, of the strange customs of Earth that seemed so foreign to Celine. Her curiosity about humanity seemed endless, and Zachary found himself opening up in ways he hadn't anticipated. He shared stories of his childhood, of his experiences in the military, and of his dreams for the future. In turn, Celine spoke of her own life, her upbringing in the royal palace, her training to be the next ruler, and the pressure she felt to live up to the expectations of her people. Their conversations began to reveal something deeper, something neither had anticipated. Despite the vast cultural differences between them, there was a shared understanding, a recognition that they both carried the weight of responsibility for their people. They both wanted peace, but they also wanted something more, something beyond politics and alliances. There was a yearning for connection, for something real. As the evening wore on, the conversation turned to the proposal, the heart of the matter that had brought them together. Zachary studied Celine carefully, his gaze soft but intense. "I know you have doubts about this marriage, Celine," he said quietly. "And I understand. It's not easy, this kind of decision. It's not just about us. It's about our people, our worlds. But I want you to know that I'm not here to force you into anything. I'm here because I believe in what this union could mean, not just for our two species, but for the future." Celine's eyes flickered with emotion. You speak of a future, but what about the present? She asked softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. What if this union changes everything we've ever known? What if we can't live up to the expectations placed on us? Zachary reached across the table, his hand hovering for a moment before gently resting on hers. Maybe we can't live up to everything everyone expects, he said, his voice steady. But we can create something new, together. We don't have to be bound by tradition or duty alone. We can choose our path, Celine. And if we do it together, we can find a way to make this work. For both of us and for the future we want to build. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that spoke volumes, one that carried the weight of understanding and mutual respect. Celine's hand trembled slightly under his, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she allowed him to hold it, her fingers brushing against his in a quiet gesture of trust. I never expected any of this, Celine whispered, her voice barely audible. I never thought I would be sitting here sharing a meal with someone like you, talking about the future in ways that are so personal. But I think I understand now. I think I see what you mean about the heart, about following it even when it's hard. Maybe that's what we both need. Zachary smiled, a sense of relief washing over him. Then let's start there, he said. Let's follow our hearts and see where this takes us. As the evening came to a close, Zachary and Celine shared a quiet moment, their gazes meeting across the table. There was a new understanding between them now, a recognition that this wasn't just about a political marriage. It was about building something deeper, something that transcended duty and obligation. Later, as they left the dining room, Zachary couldn't shake the feeling that this had been a turning point, not just in their relationship but in the history of their peoples. They were about to embark on a journey that would not only change the course of their lives, but also the fate of the galaxy itself. But there was still much to be done. The challenges ahead were immense, and the path would not be easy. But in that moment, as they walked side by side, Zachary knew one thing for sure. They had taken the first step together, and that was all that mattered. As Zachary and Celine prepared to face the next phase of their journey, they both knew that their union would challenge everything they had ever known. There would be political pressures, cultural differences, and personal struggles to overcome. But they also knew that the future was theirs to shape, together. And with that knowledge came a sense of determination and hope, the kind of hope that only comes from finding a connection that could change everything. The following days passed in a blur of royal ceremonies, endless meetings, and the growing realization that Zachary and Celine's proposed union had become more than just a political arrangement. What had begun as a desperate attempt to prevent a galactic war was slowly morphing into something much more personal, much more intimate. Each encounter, each conversation, seemed to tighten the invisible bond between them, weaving threads of connection that neither of them had expected. The weight of their decision, of the entire galaxy watching and waiting for them to take the next step, began to settle heavily on Zachary's shoulders. It wasn't just about him and Celine anymore. It was about the fate of two worlds, two species, and the future of countless generations to come. But as they walked together through the ornate corridors of the palace one afternoon, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of purpose. They were not just political figures. They were people, two individuals with their own hopes and fears, who had somehow found each other in the midst of chaos. Celine walked beside him, her presence calm yet undeniably powerful. Her demeanor had softened since their first meeting, and she no longer wore the impenetrable facade of royalty. In its place was a woman who was grappling with the same emotions and uncertainties as him. She wasn't just a princess. She was a partner, a confidant, and perhaps someone he was starting to truly care for. The halls of the palace were as magnificent as ever, crystal pillars reaching towards the sky, walls adorned with glowing patterns that seemed to tell stories of an ancient civilization. The palace itself felt alive, pulsating with energy, just as the tension between them felt alive. It was no longer just about the politics of marriage. There was something unspoken, something neither of them had yet fully acknowledged, but both could feel. A growing attraction, a mutual respect that was beginning to blur the lines between duty and desire. As they neared the royal gardens once again, Celine spoke, her voice breaking through Zachary's thoughts. "I know you have your doubts about this arrangement, Zachary," she said quietly, not looking at him, but instead gazing ahead, as though seeking the right words. "And I understand. This isn't just about us, it's about the future of both our worlds. But I want you to know that I'm not going into this lightly. I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers, but I do know that there's something here. Something worth exploring." Zachary nodded slowly, his heart heavy. He had thought about it day and night, and while his heart was torn, there was no escaping the reality of what they were about to undertake. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he replied. "About humanity, about emotions, and how we follow our hearts even when it's difficult. I don't think I ever understood it fully until now." Celine stopped walking, turning, to face him. Her blue eyes searched his, and for a moment Zachary saw the vulnerability in them, the weight of the world she carried. "And what do you think, Zachary? Can you see it? Can you see a future where we don't just exist side by side as allies, but as something more?" Her words hung in the air like a question with no immediate answer. Zachary found himself at a crossroads, torn between the life he had always known and the possibility of something he had never imagined. He had been trained to be a soldier, a commander, a diplomat. But now, for the first time, he wondered if those roles were enough to define him. "I want to believe it," he said quietly, his voice laced with uncertainty. "I want to believe that there's more to this than just a political agreement. But there's still so much we don't know. There's still so much that could go wrong." Celine's expression softened. She reached out, gently placing a hand on his arm, and Zachary felt the warmth of her touch seep through the layers of armor, both physical and emotional, that he had built over the years. It was a simple gesture, but it meant more than words could convey. "I'm scared too," she admitted. "But that's why we need to take this one step at a time, together. We don't have all the answers, but we can figure it out." Zachary looked at her, his heart swelling with something he hadn't expected. "Together," he repeated, the word tasting foreign on his tongue, yet somehow right. As they walked on through the gardens, their conversation turned from politics to more personal matters. They spoke of their families, their childhoods, and their hopes for the future. For the first time since arriving on Lumia Prime, Zachary felt as though he were truly connecting with Celine, not just as a princess, but as a person. She laughed at his stories of Earth's quirks, and he listened intently as she shared memories of her own youth, a time before the weight of the crown had rested on her shoulders. By the time they reached the small clearing where a quiet fountain flowed, their bond had grown even stronger. It was as if the very air between them had shifted, charged with the promise of something new, something uncertain yet undeniable. As they sat by the fountain, Celine turned to him, her eyes gleaming with both mischief and sincerity. "I don't know how this will play out, Zachary, but I do know that whatever happens, I'm glad we're doing this together." Zachary met her gaze, his chest tightening with emotion. "So am I, Celine. So am I." The next few days were filled with ceremonies and discussions, but their personal connection continued to grow. The High Council, while initially skeptical, began to recognize the seriousness of their bond. Political negotiations aside, it was clear to everyone involved that the union between Zachary and Celine was more than just a diplomatic necessity. It was a partnership, one that had the potential to bridge the gap between their two worlds. But just as the pieces seemed to be falling into place, new challenges arose. Factions within the Therian Empire began to question the legitimacy of the union. Some argued that the alliance with humanity was a threat to their heritage, to their very existence. Others, particularly within the royal court, feared that Celine's choice of a human mate would spark rebellion among the nobility. Zachary and Celine found themselves at the center of a political storm, with both their people questioning their every move. Yet through it all, their bond only deepened. In private moments, away from the prying eyes of the court, they began to realize that their connection had become more than just a political gesture. It had become the very foundation of their future. As the days passed and the pressure mounted, they stood side by side, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The political landscape might have been shifting beneath their feet, but one thing was clear. Together they could weather any storm. And with every passing moment, their love grew stronger. But the hardest test was yet to come. The final step, in their union, the ultimate trial of trust and commitment, would soon reveal whether their bond was truly strong enough to withstand the complexities of their worlds.